I'm Harper Davis, 35, and 3 months ago I was sitting on a park bench in the pouring rain, everything I owned stuffed in a weathered backpack beside me. My designer clothes and corner office were just distant memories, replaced by a donated jacket and the constant worry about where I'd sleep that night. When the man in the expensive suit approached, I instinctively clutched my backpack tighter, preparing to run. His question caught me off guard. "Are you Harper Davis?" Before I could decide whether to lie, he continued, "You just inherited $97 million. I laughed bitterly, certain this was the cruelest prank in a year full of crushing disappointments. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If you've ever faced a moment that completely changed your life's direction, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I went from corporate success to homeless to inheriting millions overnight. Trust me, the twists in this story will leave you speechless. Let's dive into how my perfect life first fell apart. 18 months before that rainy day in the park, my life looked perfect from the outside. I was Harper Evans then, a successful marketing executive at a prestigious firm in Chicago, married to Mason Evans, a powerful attorney with family connections throughout the city's elite circles. We lived in a stunning 5-bedroom house in Lake Forest, with manicured gardens and a kitchen I'd spent months renovating to chef standards, despite rarely finding time to cook. Our Instagram feed was a carefully curated display of vacation photos from Bali and the Amalfi Coast, charity galas where we'd dress in designer outfits, and the occasional intimate dinner party with friends who were equally successful and beautiful. Everyone envied our life. I envied our life, somehow feeling like I was watching it from outside rather than living it. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Mason started coming home later, offering vague explanations about client meetings that couldn't be scheduled during regular hours. His phone would be placed face down whenever I entered a room. He grew distant, uninterested in the stories about my day or the plans I tried to make for our future. "We should think about starting a family soon," I suggested one night over a dinner he barely touched. "I'm turning 35 next year. Let's not rush into anything," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "The firm's considering me for partner. The timing isn't right." It was always about his career, his timing, his needs. I'd supported him through law school, moved 3 times for his job opportunities, and rearranged my life to fit his ambitions. Only later would I realize how completely I'd lost myself in becoming Mrs. Mason Evans. The truth crashed into my carefully constructed world on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd left work early with a migraine and returned home to find Mason's car in the driveway at 2 p.m. completely out of character for him. Walking quietly through the house, I heard sounds from our bedroom that instantly made my stomach drop. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my husband of 7 years in bed with Jessica Porter, my close friend since college, a woman who'd been a bridesmaid at our wedding and who had comforted me just weeks earlier as I confessed my worries about my marriage. "Harper!" Mason exclaimed, his expression shifting quickly from shock to something calculating. "This isn't—" "Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like," I interrupted, my voice eerily calm despite the roaring in my ears. What followed was the most devastating 18 months of my life. Mason's response to being caught wasn't to apologize but to attack. He hired the city's most aggressive divorce attorney, a former mentor of his, and unleashed a campaign to protect his assets and reputation at the expense of mine. Suddenly, mutual friends stopped returning my calls. Rumors circulated that I'd been unstable, unreasonable, even abusive. Mason's family closed ranks around him, despite his mother previously treating me like a daughter. His father, a prominent judge, made calls to his network of connections. I naively believed truth would prevail, that my years of supporting Mason and building our life together would count for something. Instead, I watched as he and his legal team systematically dismantled everything I thought I knew about justice. "We're contesting the prenuptial agreement," my attorney informed me after 3 months of legal battles. "But I should prepare you, Mason has documentation suggesting you breached the fidelity clause." "That's impossible," I protested. "I never—" "They have photos of you with another man in a hotel lobby. They're claiming an affair. The other man was my cousin, visiting from Portland. We'd met for coffee in a hotel restaurant because it was convenient to his conference." Mason knew this, but twisted the innocent meeting into something sordid. While fighting the divorce battle, I was called into my boss's office and informed that the company was restructuring and eliminating my position. Only later did I learn that Mason's firm handled significant business for my company's largest client, who had suddenly threatened to pull their account. The final blow came when the divorce settlement was approved. Despite the prenup supposedly protecting the assets I'd brought into the marriage, Mason's legal maneuvering left me with almost nothing. He'd hidden assets, devalued properties, and created a paper trail suggesting I'd been compensated fairly when I hadn't. My savings depleted by legal fees, unable to find work due to mysteriously withdrawn job offers and damaged professional references, I watched my life unravel with horrifying speed. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my small apartment, the only place I could afford, surrounded by unpacked boxes, holding an eviction notice. That night, I slept in my car for the first time, curled in the back seat of my 10-year-old Honda, parked in a Walmart lot because I'd read online it was relatively safe. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how the woman who once hosted charity fundraisers was now homeless. The first week of homelessness felt temporary, a humiliating but brief chapter before I'd surely find a solution. I maintained appearances as best I could, using the gym membership I hadn't yet canceled to shower and change clothes. I applied for jobs during the day at coffee shops, buying the minimum coffee required to use their Wi-Fi, stretching each cup for hours. "We'll keep your resume on file," became the refrain I heard daily, always delivered with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. One hiring manager was more direct. "Look, your qualifications are impressive, but we heard some things. Maybe try somewhere not in Mason's network?" Mason's network, as it turned out, encompassed most of Chicago's corporate world. My marketing expertise was rendered worthless in a city where my ex-husband's influence touched every major company and many of the smaller ones. I expanded my search to retail and service jobs, positions far below my qualifications, but even those applications went nowhere. My savings, what little the divorce had left me, dwindled rapidly. Hotel rooms, even the cheapest ones, were an unsustainable expense. I rationed my funds carefully, calculating how long I could afford to eat while maintaining the gym membership that provided my only access to basic hygiene. 63 days after the divorce, my car, the last significant asset I owned, was repossessed. I'd fallen behind on payments after prioritizing food and the gym membership. Watching it being towed away removed my shelter and transportation in one crushing blow. That night, I slept on a bench in Millennium Park, terrified of every shadow and sound. By morning, I knew I needed help. Swallowing my pride, I researched homeless shelters on a library computer. "First time?" asked a woman named Patricia at the intake desk of Chicago Women's Shelter. Her matter-of-fact tone somehow made the question less painful to answer. "Is it that obvious?" I attempted a smile. "Everyone has a first day here." Yesterday, I was processing a neurosurgeon who lost everything to medical bills after her husband died without insurance. The shelter provided a narrow bed in a room shared with 7 other women. I kept my backpack containing my laptop, a few changes of clothes, and my remaining personal documents under my pillow while I slept. Even in my diminished circumstances, I was careful to protect the professional certifications and degrees that represented years of work and achievement. Shelter life operated on strict schedules. Lights out at 9 p.m., everyone out by 7 a.m. regardless of weather or circumstances. During the day, I continued my job search, now expanding to suburbs accessible by public transportation. Each rejection reinforced what was becoming increasingly clear: Mason had blacklisted me throughout the region. As weeks turned to months, I learned the geography of survival: which public bathrooms were reliably clean, which restaurants would look the other way if you nursed a single coffee for hours, which libraries had the most comfortable chairs for reading and occasionally dozing through afternoons. My remaining friends gradually fell away. Some couldn't handle the stark reality of my situation. Others tried to help initially but grew frustrated when my problems proved too complex for quick solutions. The uncomfortable truth about homelessness is how quickly it separates you from the social fabric that once supported your identity. "You're new to this, aren't you?" The question came from an elderly woman named Ruth, who found me crying in a corner of the public library after yet another failed job interview. "Is there a handbook I missed?" I asked, trying to joke through my tears. "Sort of," she replied, sitting beside me, "but it's more of an oral tradition." Ruth became my unlikely mentor in homeless survival. In her 70s, with sharp eyes and a commanding presence despite her circumstances, She'd been homeless for 3 years after a series of mental health crises and medical bankruptcies ended her teaching career. First rule, she told me as we shared a meal at a church food program: protect your dignity, not your pride. Pride keeps you from asking for help. Dignity keeps you human while you receive it. Under Ruth's guidance, I learned which shelters had the best services, which social workers could actually help navigate the Byzantine systems of assistance, and most importantly, how to maintain hope when everything suggested it was foolish to do so. I was a professor of literature for 30 years, Ruth told me one evening as we claimed adjacent benches in the park. Specialized in Renaissance poetry, now I'm an expert in urban survival. Life's strange that way. By the 3-month mark, I had reluctantly accepted my new reality. The corporate executive was gone, replaced by a woman who counted her worth in hot meals and safe places to sleep. My designer wardrobe had been replaced by donations from church clothing drives. My 5-year marketing plan had narrowed to finding enough work to afford a security deposit on an apartment sometime in the nebulous future. I was sitting on my usual bench during a sudden rainstorm. Homeless people learn that changing locations often means losing them when the man in the expensive suit approached, umbrella in hand, changing everything with a single question. William Crawford sat in his penthouse office, absently watching the evening news while his assistant reviewed his schedule for the following day. At 82, William had built Crawford Industries from a small manufacturing operation into a global conglomerate with interests in everything from real estate to pharmaceuticals. Forbes estimated his worth at just under $3 billion, a figure that had long since ceased to mean anything to him personally. The city's homeless population has increased 12% over the last year, the newscaster announced, drawing William's attention back to the screen. Local advocates are calling for more resources as shelters report operating beyond capacity. The segment showed footage of a downtown homeless encampment, people huddled under makeshift shelters as city officials posted eviction notices. William was about to ask his assistant to change the channel when a face in the background caught his eye. "Stop," he said sharply. "Rewind that." His assistant complied, used to his sometimes abrupt requests. "Pause there," William instructed, rising from his chair to approach the screen. "That woman? With the red hair." The camera had briefly captured a slender woman with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face partially turned away as she helped an elderly woman gather belongings. "Ellie?" William whispered, though he knew it was impossible. Eleanor Bennett had been gone for nearly 40 years. But the resemblance was striking: the same high cheekbones, the proud set of the shoulders, even in difficult circumstances. William's mind traveled back 60 years to summer evenings by Lake Michigan, to a brilliant young woman with fiery hair and dreams of changing the world through art. Eleanor Bennett had been his first and perhaps only true love, before ambition and circumstance had driven them apart. "Sir?" His assistant's voice broke through his memories. "Is everything all right?" "Find out who that woman is," William said, pointing to the screen. "Immediately." While his staff began making inquiries, William opened his private safe and removed a worn leather journal, Eleanor's parting gift to him in 1962. Inside were letters she'd sent over the decades, updates he'd never responded to out of respect for her new life, though he'd read each one countless times. Eleanor had married Thomas Davis, a kind but unremarkable insurance salesman. They'd had one daughter, Catherine, who'd married and had a daughter of her own, Harper. Through Eleanor's occasional letters, William had followed the broad strokes of these lives adjacent to his own path not taken. The most recent letter, dated just 6 months earlier, had been different from the others. Eleanor, now widowed for 12 years, had written to inform William that she was dying of congestive heart failure and to make a final request. "My dear William, I've never asked anything of you, though I've kept you informed of my life's journey. Now, facing the end, I must break that pattern. My granddaughter Harper is alone in the world. Catherine and her husband died in an accident 10 years ago, and Harper's recent divorce has left her vulnerable. Should you ever cross paths, please look after her as you might have looked after our own grandchild in another life. She has your spirit, though she doesn't know it. With eternal affection, Ellie." William had been devastated by the letter, arranging immediately to send flowers to Eleanor's funeral while respecting her wishes to remain anonymous in her life. He had intended to find Harper and honor Eleanor's request, but his own health had taken a dramatic turn shortly after. Terminal, his doctor had said plainly during a private consultation. 6 months, perhaps a year with aggressive treatment. William had chosen to forego treatment that would diminish his quality of life, instead focusing on putting his affairs in order. Finding Eleanor's granddaughter had been on his list, but the task had seemed less urgent than restructuring his business interests. Now, seeing the woman who might be Harper in such dire circumstances gave the mission new urgency. His private investigator, Thomas Reed, confirmed his suspicion 3 days later. Harper Davis, formerly Harper Evans, Reed reported, placing a file on William's desk. 35, divorced from attorney Mason Evans 18 months ago. Former marketing executive, currently homeless. The divorce was particularly vicious. He used family connections to blacklist her professionally throughout Chicago. Find her, William instructed, immediately. That won't be simple, Reed cautioned. Homeless individuals maintain irregular patterns, and she's been avoiding social services that might create a paper trail, possibly due to shame about her circumstances. I don't care what it takes, Williams said firmly. I made a promise. Reed nodded, understanding the gravity of the assignment. I'll find her, sir. For the next 3 weeks, Reed methodically searched Chicago's homeless community. He visited shelters, food programs, and known gathering places, showing Harper's photograph and offering cash for information. The homeless community was understandably suspicious of a well-dressed man asking questions, but Reed's respectful approach and genuine concern eventually earned him leads. The woman you're looking for helps out at the Street Mary's meal program on Wednesdays, a shelter volunteer finally told him. She comes with an older lady they call Professor Ruth. Reed arrived at Street Mary's early the following Wednesday, positioned to observe without causing alarm. When Harper arrived alongside an elderly woman, he recognized her immediately from the photographs and news footage. Despite her circumstances, she carried herself with the same dignity Eleanor had described in her letters. As Harper helped serve meals to others in need, somehow maintaining the spirit of service despite her own desperate situation, Reed watched, planning his approach carefully. This wasn't a routine assignment. William had been clear. Harper must be approached with complete respect, her dignity preserved throughout. When the meal service ended, Reed followed at a distance as Harper and her elderly companion walked toward Lakefront Park. Rain began to fall, and Reed watched as Ruth sought shelter under a nearby store awning while Harper remained on the bench, seemingly lost in thought. The moment had come. Adjusting his tie and opening his umbrella, Reed approached the woman whose life was about to change dramatically if she was willing to believe him. Thomas Reed approached the park bench carefully, observing the woman sitting alone in the rain. Despite her circumstances, Harper Davis maintained an air of composure that reminded him of William's description of her grandmother. Her clothes were clearly donated, mismatched, and slightly too large, but clean and carefully maintained. She clutched a weathered backpack protectively against her side as he approached. "Excuse me," Reed said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Are you Harper Davis?" Her expression immediately shifted from surprise to wariness, eyes darting toward potential escape routes, the behavior of someone who had learned that strangers rarely brought good news. "Who's asking?" she replied, neither confirming nor denying her identity. "My name is Thomas Reed," he said, extending a business card while keeping the umbrella balanced. "I'm a private investigator working for William Crawford." She didn't take the card, keeping both hands firmly on her backpack. "I don't know any William Crawford." "He knew your grandmother, Eleanor Bennett," Reed explained gently. "Very well, in fact." That caught her attention. "My grandmother died 6 months ago." "Yes, Mr. Crawford is aware. She contacted him before her passing." Reed took a careful step forward, offering the card again. "You've inherited a substantial sum from Mr. Crawford's estate. $97 million, to be precise." Harper's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Right, and I'm secretly a duchess. Look, whatever scam you're running, find someone else. I don't have anything worth taking." Reed understood her skepticism in her position. He would have had the same reaction. He reached slowly into his jacket, removing an envelope sealed with the Crawford Industries logo. "This contains preliminary documentation of the inheritance, including a letter from William Crawford explaining his connection to your grandmother. I'm also authorized to provide immediate assistance hotel accommodations, clothing, meals while the formal processes are completed. Harper stared at the envelope, clearly conflicted. People don't just give away $97 million, especially to homeless women they've never met. Under normal circumstances, I would agree, Reed acknowledged. But your situation is unique, as is William's. He's terminally ill and setting his affairs in order. Meeting you is extremely important to him. Rain continued to fall as Harper considered his words. Across the park, Ruth watched their interaction with visible concern, ready to intervene if her friend appeared threatened. "Show me some ID," Harper finally said. "Real ID, not just a business card anyone could print." Reed complied, producing his driver's license and private investigator's license. Harper examined them carefully before returning them. "Let's say I believe you're who you claim to be," she said cautiously. "That doesn't mean this inheritance is real. Mr. Crawford has arranged transportation to his estate, where he can explain everything personally," Reed replied. "You're welcome to bring your friend if that would make you more comfortable." He nodded toward Ruth, acknowledging her protective presence. Harper glanced toward her backpack. "Everything I own is in here. I can't just leave it." "You can bring it with you," Reed assured her. "No one will separate you from your possessions." After a long moment of consideration, Harper stood. "I'll talk to Ruth first." Reed waited patiently as Harper crossed to her friend. Their conversation was animated, Ruth's expression shifting from concern to disbelief as Harper explained the situation. Finally, both women approached. "Ruth thinks I should go with you," Harper said, still clearly uncertain. "She says I have nothing to lose and potentially everything to gain." Ruth, her eyes sharp with intelligence despite her weathered appearance, addressed Reed directly. "If anything happens to her, I have your name and face memorized. There are people who will listen to me, despite appearances." Reed nodded respectfully. "Your concern is noted and appreciated, ma'am." Harper will be treated with the utmost respect. A sleek black town car waited at the curb, the driver standing beside the open rear door. Harper hesitated at the vehicle's edge, the stark contrast between her current reality and the luxury before her momentarily overwhelming. "This is crazy," she murmured, clutching her backpack tighter. "Often the most significant changes in life come unexpectedly," Reed offered. "Mr. Crawford waited 60 years for this meeting." With a deep breath, Harper slid into the car's plush interior, placing her backpack carefully on her lap. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, she watched Ruth through the window, the elderly woman standing straight in the rain, witnessing what might be either Harper's salvation or an elaborate deception. "The Crawford estate is about 40 minutes outside the city," Reed explained as they merged onto the highway. "Mr. Crawford relocated there permanently when his health began to decline last year." Harper stared out the window, watching raindrops race across the glass as the city gave way to increasingly affluent suburbs. The manicured lawns and impressive homes reminded her of her previous life, before Mason had systematically dismantled everything she'd worked for. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Even if my grandmother knew this Crawford person, why would he leave me anything, let alone millions?" "That's Mr. Crawford's story to tell," Reed replied. "But I can share that he and your grandmother were very close many years ago, before she married your grandfather." The car turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees, approaching an imposing gate that swung open automatically as they approached. Beyond stretched a sweeping driveway leading to what could only be described as a mansion, a sprawling stone structure with multiple wings and meticulously maintained grounds. Harper's breath caught as the magnitude of what might be happening began to register. Either this was an extraordinarily elaborate hoax for what purpose, she couldn't imagine, or her life was about to change in ways she couldn't comprehend. As the car stopped at the mansion's entrance, Harper clutched her backpack like a shield, suddenly conscious of her appearance, the donated clothes, unwashed hair, the visible signs of months of hardship. What awaited her inside those imposing doors might be salvation or disappointment, truth or deception. "Ready?" Reed asked gently. "No," Harper admitted, "but I'm going in anyway." The mansion's grand foyer was a study in understated opulence, marble floors, a sweeping staircase, artwork that even Harper's untrained eye recognized as museum quality. A silver-haired butler greeted them with practiced formality, though Harper caught his momentary surprise at her appearance before his professional mask returned. "Mr. Crawford is waiting in the library, Miss Davis," he announced, gesturing toward a hallway. May I take your? He hesitated, eyeing her worn backpack. It stays with me, Harper stated firmly, surprising herself with her assertiveness in these intimidating surroundings. Of course, the butler nodded, leading them through the mansion. House staff paused their activities to watch as Harper passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. Harper straightened her shoulders, refusing to be diminished by their judgment, though she acutely felt the contrast between her worn jeans and donated sweater and the immaculate surroundings. The library doors were massive oak panels that swung open silently to reveal a two-story room lined with bookshelves. Sitting in a leather chair near a fireplace was an elderly man who rose slowly as they entered, his movements careful but deliberate. William Crawford was tall and lean, his posture still commanding despite his obvious age and the oxygen tube discreetly running to his nostrils. His tailored suit hung slightly loose, suggesting recent weight loss, but his eyes were sharp and alert as they fixed on Harper. Eleanor's granddaughter, he said, his voice surprisingly strong. The resemblance is remarkable. Harper remained by the door, uncertain. Mr. Crawford, I'm not sure why I'm here. William gestured to a chair opposite his. Please sit, we have much to discuss. After a moment's hesitation, Harper crossed the room and perched on the edge of the chair, her backpack still clutched protectively. Would you care for tea? Something stronger, perhaps? William offered. Answers would be preferable, Harper replied. Mr. Reed says I've inherited $97 million from you, which is impossible since we've never met. William smiled, a flash of charm that hinted at the younger man he'd once been. Direct, like your grandmother. Good, he turned to Reed. Thank you, Thomas. That will be all for now. Once Reed had departed, William studied Harper for a long moment. I met Eleanor Bennett, your grandmother, in 1959 at Northwestern University. I was studying business. She was studying art. She was the most vibrant, intelligent woman I'd ever encountered. You dated my grandmother? Harper asked, trying to process this information. For 3 years, William confirmed. We planned to marry, in fact, but life intervened. My father's business was failing, and an opportunity arose that required me to move to New York immediately. I asked Ellie to come with me, but she was committed to finishing her degree in Chicago. William's gaze drifted to the fireplace, memories clearly playing across his features. We promised to reunite after she graduated, but by then, Crawford Industries was consuming every moment of my life. Ellie eventually met your grandfather, a good man who could give her the stability and attention I couldn't. This still doesn't explain why you'd leave me millions of dollars, Harper pointed out. William nodded, reaching for a folder on the table beside him. Ellie and I maintained a connection throughout her life. She wrote to me periodically after her marriage, when your mother was born after Thomas died. He opened the folder, revealing decades of correspondence. I never responded, out of respect for her marriage, but I treasured every letter. He handed Harper an envelope bearing her grandmother's distinctive handwriting. This arrived 6 months ago, shortly before her passing. Harper read the letter with increasing disbelief, her grandmother's final communication with William, mentioning Harper's divorce and requesting William's assistance should their paths ever cross. You found me because of this letter? She asked, her voice catching. In a manner of speaking, William replied. I'd intended to honor Ellie's request, but my own health took a downturn. Then, by complete chance, I saw you in the background of a news segment about homelessness. The resemblance to Ellie was unmistakable. He pressed a button on the table beside him, and a hidden door in the bookshelves slid open. There's something you should see. William led Harper into what appeared to be a private study. The walls were covered with photographs spanning decades, and to Harper's astonishment, many featured her. Ellie sent me photographs throughout the years, William explained as Harper moved from image to image in stunned silence. Your mother's wedding, your high school graduation, your college commencement. Harper stared at a recent photograph of herself from a marketing industry award ceremony taken just months before her divorce. She sent you these? All these years? Ellie wanted me to know her family, even from a distance, William confirmed. She was particularly proud of you, your intelligence, your resilience. Qualities I see clearly, given what you've endured recently. Harper turned to face him directly. So this inheritance, it's because you loved my grandmother 60 years ago? Partly, William acknowledged. But also because I'm dying, Harper. Pancreatic cancer, terminal. I have perhaps 3 months remaining. He gestured to the oxygen tank discreetly positioned behind his chair. When faced with mortality, one considers legacy. I have no children, no direct heirs. My company will continue under professional management, but my personal fortune, he shrugged. Ellie was the love of my life, though I didn't have the wisdom to prioritize that love. Supporting her granddaughter seems a fitting final act. Harper sank into a chair, overwhelmed. I don't know how to respond to any of this. You don't need to respond immediately, William assured her. The inheritance is already arranged, $97 million in liquid assets, plus minority ownership in several Crawford subsidiaries. The documents require only your signature. Why $97 million specifically? Harper asked, fixating on this detail amid the overwhelming information. William smiled. Ellie was born in 1942. I'm honoring her memory with her birth year. Harper's eyes filled with tears for her grandmother, for William's unrequited devotion, for the bizarre twist of fate that had led her from a park bench to this moment. There's something else, William said gently, opening a drawer and removing a small wooden box. Ellie returned this when she married Thomas. I'd like you to have it now. Inside the box was a delicate emerald ring, not ostentatious, but clearly valuable and vintage. I'd intended it as an engagement ring, William explained. The emerald matched her eyes, the same eyes you have. Harper closed the box carefully, her mind reeling with revelations. Her grandmother, the quiet, gentle woman who'd taught her watercolor painting and made the best apple pie in Illinois, had been the great love of a billionaire's life, a connection maintained secretly for decades. I need time to process all this, she said finally. Of course, William agreed. The staff has prepared a suite for you. Stay as long as you wish. The inheritance documents aren't urgent, though I confess, I don't have the luxury of unlimited time. As Harper rose to follow the butler who had materialized to show her to her room, William added, One request, if I may. I'd like to know you, Harper, in the time I have left. Not out of obligation, but because knowing Ellie's granddaughter would bring me great joy. Harper paused at the door, looking back at the elderly man who had loved her grandmother faithfully for 60 years and was now offering her an unimaginable second chance. I'd like that too, she said softly, realizing she meant it. The guest suite was larger than Harper's entire former apartment, featuring a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a sitting area with plush furniture, and a bathroom with a soaking tub and separate rainfall shower. After the butler departed, Harper stood in the center of this opulence, her donated clothes and scuffed shoes suddenly painfully incongruous. For several minutes, she simply breathed, trying to reconcile the morning she'd spent helping at a soup kitchen with the present reality of standing in a billionaire's mansion as his presumptive heir. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. The bathroom beckoned, and Harper surrendered to the lure of hot water, a luxury she'd experienced only sporadically over the past months, at shelter showers with strictly enforced time limits. Peeling off layers of clothing that carried the subtle but persistent scent of someone without reliable laundry access, she caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her once healthy frame had grown gaunt, cheekbones too prominent, collarbones sharp beneath pale skin. The professional highlights in her auburn hair had grown out, leaving a stark line of demarcation between salon color and natural shade. Dark circles shadowed her eyes that, as William had noted, were indeed the same emerald as the ring he'd offered her grandmother. The shower was transformative hot water without time constraints, luxury bath products, the simple dignity of being thoroughly clean. Afterward, Harper discovered the closet contained women's clothing in approximately her size. A note explained that a personal shopper had selected basics until Harper could choose her own wardrobe. Dressed in soft pants and a cashmere sweater that hung loosely on her diminished frame, Harper ventured to explore her new surroundings. A house manager named Mrs. Chen intercepted her in the hallway. Mr. Crawford thought you might be hungry, the woman explained, leading Harper to a sunlit breakfast room where a light meal awaited. The simple act of eating without calculating cost or worrying about where her next meal would come from felt surreal. Harper realized she'd developed habits of food insecurity, eating quickly, hoarding bread rolls, mentally noting exit locations that now felt out of place but impossible to immediately shed. Mr. Crawford has arranged for Dr. Patel to visit this afternoon, Mrs. Chen informed her as she cleared Harper's plate. Standard physical examination, nothing to worry about. Harper hadn't seen a doctor since losing her health insurance post-divorce. The subsequent examination revealed the physical toll of homelessness, nutritional deficiencies, untreated bronchitis, stress-related issues. Dr. Patel prescribed medications and supplements, scheduling follow-up appointments with specialists. That evening, Harper attempted to sleep in the luxurious bed but found herself restless and anxious in its softness. After tossing for hours, she gathered blankets and pillows and made a nest on the floor, where the firmness resembled the shelter cots and park benches her body had adapted to. Even surrounded by luxury, her nervous system remained calibrated to survival mode. The following days brought a parade of professionals organized by William's efficient staff attorneys, explaining inheritance details, financial advisors outlining investment options, even a therapist specializing in trauma and life transitions. Many lottery winners and sudden heirs experience adjustment disorder. The therapist, Dr. Winters, explained during their first session, going from survival to abundance creates psychological whiplash. "I keep waiting to wake up," Harper admitted. Or, for someone to reveal this is an elaborate practical joke. "That's a normal protective response," Dr. Winters assured her. "Your brain is trying to manage expectations to prevent further disappointment." Meeting with William became a daily ritual, usually afternoons in the library or the solarium when weather permitted. Despite his declining health, his mind remained sharp, and Harper found herself increasingly drawn to his stories about her grandmother as a young woman. Ellie organized an art installation protesting the university's investments in companies supporting apartheid. William recalled one afternoon. She was nearly expelled, but the faculty senate ultimately sided with her. She was fearless about standing up for her convictions. "That sounds like the grandmother I knew," Harper smiled. She once chained herself to a tree they planned to cut down for a parking lot expansion. She was 72 at the time. These conversations gradually constructed a bridge between Harper's known history and previously hidden chapters of her family story. Each revelation helped integrate her fragmented sense of identity. The legal aspects of the inheritance proceeded efficiently, managed by William's longtime attorneys. Harper's signature transformed her from homeless to multimillionaire in the stroke of a pen, though the psychological transition lagged far behind the legal one. "I'd like to establish a foundation," she told William over tea one afternoon, about 2 weeks after her arrival, "to address homelessness, particularly for women escaping domestic situations." William nodded approvingly, a fitting tribute to both your experience and Ellie's social consciousness. "There's something else," Harper added hesitantly. "My friend Ruth, from the park. She was a literature professor before mental health issues and medical bankruptcy left her homeless. I'd like to bring her here, get her proper treatment." Of course, William agreed immediately. "Thomas will arrange it." Ruth's arrival at the estate 3 days later created a momentary stir among staff, her appearance even more disheveled than Harper's had been. But the elderly woman maintained her dignity, accepting assistance without surrendering autonomy. "Quite the plot twist in your story," Ruth remarked dryly as Harper showed her to a guest suite. "From park bench to palace in one improbable chapter." "I keep thinking I'll adjust to it," Harper confessed, "but everything feels surreal." "That's because you're experiencing life through 2 different lenses simultaneously," Ruth observed with the insight that had made her a beloved professor. "The homeless woman and the heiress. Integration takes time. With proper medication and care, Ruth's condition stabilized remarkably quickly. Her sharp intelligence and academic background emerged from beneath the survival behaviors homelessness had required, revealing the woman she'd been before circumstances had overwhelmed her. As days became weeks, Harper's body began recovering proper nutrition, restoring healthy weight, quality sleep, repairing cellular damage, appropriate medications addressing neglected health issues. But psychological recovery proved more complex. The first night she successfully slept in the bed rather than on the floor marked a milestone. So did the day she donated her backpack and its contents to a homeless outreach program, finally secure enough to release these symbols of her survival period. Yet certain triggers could instantly transport her back to vulnerability. A surprise rescheduling that left her temporarily without transportation sparked disproportionate panic. The first rainfall after moving into the estate sent her searching for shelter before she remembered she now had a permanent roof. Recovery isn't linear, Dr. Winters reminded her during their sessions. Trauma responses are your brain's way of protecting you from perceived threats. As you build new experiences of safety, these responses will recalibrate. 1 month after her arrival, Harper experienced a particularly vivid nightmare about being back on the streets. Unable to return to sleep, she wandered the mansion's darkened halls until she found William in his study, similarly sleepless due to pain from his advancing cancer. The hardest adjustment, she confided as they shared tea in the pre-dawn stillness, isn't the wealth itself. It's feeling solid ground beneath my feet after months of quicksand. I keep expecting it to disappear. William nodded understanding. After my first million, my father warned me, money doesn't change who you are. It amplifies it. Your experiences, both the success before your divorce and the hardship after those, shaped your character. This inheritance is simply a tool for expressing that character on a larger canvas. That conversation marked a turning point in Harper's adjustment. She began actively planning her future rather than simply reacting to her changed circumstances. The foundation took shape, with Ruth providing valuable insight into the systemic issues surrounding homelessness. Harper interviewed potential staff personally, prioritizing both professional qualifications and genuine compassion. William's health continued declining, adding urgency to their daily conversations. Though their relationship had begun through Eleanor, it had evolved into a genuine connection between two people who might have been grandfather and granddaughter in a different configuration of life's circumstances. I never thought I'd be grateful for seeing you in that news footage, William admitted one evening as they watched the sunset from his private terrace. But knowing you, Harper, has been an unexpected gift in these final months. Finding family I never knew I had, Harper replied, squeezing his thin hand gently, has been the most valuable inheritance of all. 2 months after Harper's arrival at the Crawford estate, a society columnist for the Chicago Tribune published a small item titled "Mysterious Heiress at Crawford Manor," speculating about the young woman seen accompanying William Crawford to his doctor's appointments. The article mentioned Harper by name, noting her previous marriage to prominent attorney Mason Evans and her new status as Crawford's presumed heir. The ripple effects were immediate. Harper's phone, a new number provided by William's staff, began receiving messages from people who had ignored her desperate pleas for help during her homelessness. "Harper, darling, it's Vanessa Peterson. Remember those amazing spa weekends we used to have? We simply must catch up. Hey Harper, Tom Reynolds here. Listen, about that job recommendation I couldn't provide last year, total misunderstanding. Let me make it up to you over drinks?" Each message represented someone who had abandoned her when Mason's influence made her friendship socially or professionally costly. Harper listened to them with a detached fascination, like an anthropologist studying the mating rituals of a particularly transparent species. The most significant contact came 3 days after the article appeared, a text from Mason himself. "We should talk. I always knew you'd land on your feet. Dinner at Alinea tomorrow? For old time's sake." Harper showed the message to Ruth, who had become her closest confidante and advisor. "The audacity is almost admirable," Ruth observed, adjusting her new reading glasses. Since receiving proper psychiatric care and medication, the former professor had reclaimed much of her previous persona, her academic precision now tempered by street-earned wisdom. "What will you do?" Harper considered the question carefully. "I'm not the same desperate woman he discarded, but I'm not interested in revenge either." "Perhaps justice rather than revenge?" Ruth suggested. "There's a distinction." That conversation planted a seed. The following day, Harper contacted Reed, who had transitioned from finding her to serving as her personal security consultant. "I need information about Mason Evans," she explained, "specifically his handling of our divorce and his professional conduct." Reed nodded, unsurprised by the request. "I took the liberty of compiling a preliminary file already. Mr. Crawford suggested you might eventually want to address that chapter." The file revealed what Harper had suspected, but couldn't prove during the divorce. Mason had hidden assets, manipulated evidence, and potentially committed perjury regarding their marital finances. More seriously, he had improperly used client funds to cover personal expenses during their marriage, creating false documentation that Harper had been aware of and complicit in these ethical violations. This could cost him his law license, Harper realized, reviewing the evidence. At minimum, Reed confirmed. Potentially criminal charges as well. Harper spent several days considering her options, discussing them with William during their afternoon conversations. Revenge merely continues the cycle of pain, William advised, his voice weaker as his illness progressed but his mind still incisive. But accountability serves justice. The question is, what outcome would best allow you to close this chapter? Meanwhile, Mason escalated his attempts at contact, sending flowers, leaving increasingly urgent voicemails, even attempting to reach her through mutual acquaintances. His final message revealed his true motives. Harper, we both know your connection to Crawford presents opportunities my firm could benefit from. Don't let our past differences interfere with smart business decisions. That message crystallized Harper's decision. She instructed her newly hired attorneys to formally contact Mason, requesting a meeting to discuss unresolved matters from their divorce. The meeting was scheduled at her attorney's downtown office's neutral territory, where Harper would have both legal and psychological support. Mason arrived early, dressed impeccably in a suit that probably cost more than the monthly operating budget of the homeless shelter where Harper had stayed. Harper, he greeted her with the confident smile that had once made her heart race, but now registered as nothing more than practiced manipulation. You look different. Homelessness will do that, she replied evenly, taking satisfaction in his slight flinch at her directness. Mason quickly recovered, glancing around the conference room as if assessing property values. I always knew you'd bounce back. You're a survivor. No thanks to you, Harper noted. But we're not here to reminisce. Her lead attorney, Miranda Wong, entered with 2 colleagues, carrying substantial documentation. Mason's smile faltered slightly as he registered the formal atmosphere and the volume of materials being arranged. We've identified several irregularities in the divorce proceedings, Miranda began without preamble. Specifically, undisclosed assets, misrepresentation of marital property, and potentially fraudulent financial declarations. Mason's expression hardened. If this is some attempt at reopening the settlement because you've suddenly come into money? This isn't about money, Mason, Harper interrupted. It's about truth. For the next hour, Miranda methodically presented evidence of Mason's legal and ethical violations, both during their marriage and throughout the divorce. His initial dismissiveness gave way to visible concern as the extent of the documentation became clear. You've been busy, he finally said, attempting to maintain his composure. What exactly do you want? A revised settlement? Public apology? Harper leaned forward. I want 3 things. First, a formal retraction of all statements suggesting I was aware of or involved in your misuse of client funds. Second, written acknowledgement that you interfered with my employment opportunities following our separation. Third, a substantial donation to Chicago Homeless Services in your name. And if I refuse this blackmail? Mason challenged, though his confident facade was crumbling. Then Miss Davis's evidence goes to the Illinois Attorney Disciplinary Commission, Miranda stated matter-of-factly, and potentially to the district attorney's office. The color drained from Mason's face as the full implications registered. His career, reputation, and potentially his freedom hung in the balance. I need to consult with my attorney, he said stiffly. Of course, Harper agreed. You have 48 hours to provide your response. As Mason left, visibly shaken, Harper felt no triumph or vindication, only a quiet certainty that she was finally reclaiming narrative control over a chapter of her life that had been wrested from her. Mason's capitulation came the following day, complete acceptance of all terms, with his attorney practically begging for discretion. Within a week, he had issued the required statements and made a 7-figure donation to homeless services. The resolution with Mason coincided with another significant development. Through William's connections, Harper had learned about Mason's strategic use of medical debt to control vulnerable women. Her investigation revealed a pattern. Mason specifically pursued relationships with successful women carrying substantial medical debt, positioned himself as their financial savior, then leveraged that dependency during inevitable divorces. This discovery transformed Harper's personal vindication into something more meaningful. She established a specialized division within her new foundation focused on medical debt forgiveness for domestic abuse survivors, directly addressing the vulnerability Mason had exploited in others. As news of this initiative spread, Harper began receiving messages from Mason's previous partners, women with stories disturbingly similar to her own. Each conversation reinforced that confronting Mason hadn't been about personal revenge, but about interrupting a pattern of predation. "You've turned personal trauma into systemic change," Ruth observed as they reviewed applications for the debt forgiveness program. "That's the true victory." The final piece of Harper's confrontation with her past came unexpectedly. While visiting a potential location for her foundation's headquarters, she encountered Ruth's former colleague from the university, where she'd taught before her descent into homelessness. "Professor Ruth Peterson?" the woman exclaimed, clearly shocked at seeing Ruth well-dressed and professionally engaged. "We thought you were dead?" Ruth supplied dryly. "Not yet, though not for lack of trying by our healthcare and social service systems." The encounter led to conversations about Ruth potentially returning to academia in some capacity, her wealth of first-hand experience with homelessness now adding unique value to her scholarly expertise. "Life's strange symmetry," Ruth reflected later. "You found me when you had nothing to offer but compassion. Now we're both reclaiming lives we thought permanently lost." By consciously addressing her past rather than simply fleeing it, Harper found herself increasingly able to integrate her experiences, the successful executive, the homeless woman, and now the philanthropist, into a coherent identity that incorporated all she had been and all she was becoming. "The past doesn't disappear," William told her during one of their increasingly brief conversations as his energy waned. "But it transforms from a prison into a foundation when you face it honestly." As autumn painted the Crawford estate grounds in brilliant hues of red and gold, Harper settled into a daily routine that balanced William's care with developing her foundation. Their time together had grown increasingly precious as his condition deteriorated, each conversation weighted with the awareness that their remaining moments were limited. "Tell me about your plans," William requested one crisp October morning as they sat in the solarium, sunshine warming his increasingly frail frame. Despite aggressive pain management, discomfort visibly etched his features, yet his mind remained engaged, and his interest in Harper's future unwavering. "The foundation structure is nearly finalized," Harper explained, adjusting the oxygen tube that had slipped from his nose. "We've identified 3 main initiatives: emergency housing assistance, medical debt forgiveness for abuse survivors, and employment training programs." William nodded approvingly. "Addressing immediate needs while building long-term solutions. Ellie would be proud of your balanced approach." Harper had spent weeks consulting experts in homelessness prevention, studying successful models and identifying service gaps. Rather than simply writing checks, she immersed herself in understanding systemic issues, applying her marketing executive's analytical skills to philanthropic strategy. "The abandoned Hotel Wentworth downtown is our first major acquisition," she continued. "The renovation plans maintain the historical architecture while creating 60 transitional housing units, a health clinic, job training facilities, and administrative offices. An elegant repurposing," William observed. "Breathing new life into something discarded, much like your own journey." The parallel hadn't escaped Harper. The once grand hotel had fallen into disrepair, its potential hidden beneath decades of neglect, yet its foundations remained sound, its essential character preserved beneath the damage. With proper investment and vision, it would serve a new purpose more valuable than its original incarnation. William's business acumen remained sharp despite his physical decline, and these strategy discussions became their most animated exchanges. He challenged her assumptions, refined her financial models, and connected her with his extensive network of contacts who could support her vision. "Success in business and philanthropy share common principles," William noted during one such session. "Clear objectives, strategic resource allocation, and perhaps most importantly, understanding human motivation. People want purpose, dignity, and opportunity, not just assistance." This insight influenced Harper's approach fundamentally. Rather than designing programs that positioned recipients as passive beneficiaries, she structured initiatives that invited participation, agency, and eventual self-sufficiency. The experience of homelessness had taught her that dignity was as essential as shelter. As William's condition worsened, he was transferred to a hospital-grade suite established in the East Wing, with 24-hour medical staff. Harper adjusted her schedule to spend mornings handling foundation business and afternoons at his bedside, often working on her laptop while he rested. During one such afternoon, William awoke from a morphine-induced sleep and observed her typing intently. "You've found your purpose," he stated, more observation than question. Harper paused, considering. "I've found a way to make meaning from experiences that once seemed meaningless suffering." William nodded slightly, conserving energy. The true alchemy of life, transforming pain into purpose. The Foundation's development accelerated as word of Harper's initiatives spread through Chicago's philanthropic community. Her unique perspective as someone who had experienced both privilege and extreme poverty lent authenticity to her approach, attracting partners and supporters drawn to her practical, dignity-centered vision. Unexpected allies emerged, including several of Chicago's most influential business leaders who had known William throughout his career. What began as courtesy meetings out of respect for their dying friend evolved into genuine partnerships as Harper's strategic thinking and passion impressed them. "Crawford always said you reminded him of Eleanor," one silver-haired banking executive commented after a particularly productive meeting. "Now I see he undersold it. You have his business instincts combined with her social conscience, a formidable combination." The media soon caught wind of Harper's story, with its irresistible narrative arc from executive to homeless to philanthropist. Initially reluctant to become the focus rather than her causes, Harper eventually recognized the strategic value of controlled publicity. "Your story humanizes homelessness," her newly hired communications director explained. "It challenges the comfortable fiction that it only happens to certain types of people." A carefully managed profile in the Chicago Tribune positioned Harper not as a heartwarming success story, but as a knowledgeable advocate exposing systemic failures. The article highlighted how quickly anyone could fall through America's tattered safety net, featuring statistics alongside personal narratives from people Harper had met during her months on the street. The publicity brought increased donations and partnership opportunities, but also unwelcome attention from her former social circle. Mason, still smarting from their legal confrontation, attempted to undermine her credibility through whisper campaigns questioning her mental stability and financial judgment. "He's suggesting you've experienced trauma-induced delusions of grandeur," Reed reported after monitoring these efforts, "implying you're unqualified to manage substantial assets." Harper considered this information thoughtfully rather than reactively. "Arrange a meeting with the financial journalists at the Business Chronicle. I'll walk them through our complete strategic plan, financial projections, and governance structure." Transparency is the best response to innuendo. The resulting coverage not only neutralized Mason's attempts but enhanced Harper's reputation for financial acumen and strategic philanthropy. Several professional organizations subsequently invited her to speak about innovative approaches to addressing homelessness, platforms that further amplified her impact. Through these months of intense work and William's decline, Ruth remained Harper's steadfast supporter and increasingly valuable advisor. The former professor's academic expertise complemented Harper's business background, particularly in designing educational components of their programs. "Academia taught me to analyze systems," Ruth explained as they refined the curriculum for job training programs. "Homelessness taught me how those systems actually function, or more accurately, malfunction for the vulnerable. Both perspectives are essential." Ruth had accepted a part-time position as scholar in residence at her former university, teaching a graduate seminar on social policy and homelessness. Her personal narrative, combined with her formidable intellect, made her an extraordinarily effective educator, her students regularly volunteering with Harper's Foundation after taking her course. By November, the Hotel Wentworth renovation was underway, with architects and contractors working to transform the derelict building into a beacon of possibility. Harper regularly visited the construction site, often bringing William photographs and progress reports during his increasingly lucid periods. During one such visit to his bedside, William gestured weakly for Harper to come closer. "I need you to know," he whispered, each word requiring visible effort, "how deeply proud I am of you. Not because you've handled the inheritance responsibly, though you have, but because you've remained essentially yourself through extraordinary circumstances." Harper took his hand gently, noting how thin his fingers had become. "I had an excellent example in you." William's eyes, though clouded with medication, held his characteristic intensity. "Promise me something." "Anything," Harper replied immediately. Remember that wealth is a tool, not an identity, he said. Your value was the same when you slept on that park bench as it is now. Never forget that. I promise, Harper whispered, recognizing this conversation for what it was William preparing her for his imminent absence. That night, as Harper reviewed architectural plans in her suite, she received an urgent call from William's night nurse. By the time she reached his room, he had slipped into a coma from which the doctors warned he would likely not emerge. Harper maintained her daily routine, dividing time between foundation work and sitting with William, reading aloud from Eleanor's letters or simply holding his hand. 7 days later, William Crawford passed peacefully in his sleep, leaving Harper with an extraordinary legacy not just of wealth, but of purpose. 1 year after the rainy day when Thomas Reed had approached Harper on a park bench, the William Crawford Memorial Center officially opened its doors. The former Hotel Wentworth had been transformed from a crumbling eyesore into a gleaming facility offering comprehensive services for Chicago's homeless population. The morning's dedication ceremony brought together an unlikely assembly business leaders in tailored suits mingled with social service professionals and former homeless individuals now employed by the center. Media crews captured the ribbon cutting as Harper, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, addressed the gathered crowd. William Crawford understood that true legacy isn't measured in financial statements but in lives impacted, she stated, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. This center embodies his belief that everyone deserves dignity, opportunity, and second chances, sometimes third and fourth chances too. Following the public ceremony, Harper hosted a private memorial service in the center's rooftop garden, a space specifically designed for quiet reflection with panoramic views of the city. Close associates from William's long career shared memories of the businessman whose unseen generosity had touched countless lives. William never sought recognition, his longtime attorney reflected. He believed true philanthropy happened in the shadows, but I think he would approve of this very visible monument to his values. Ruth, now fully restored to health and serving as the foundation's education director, stood beside Harper throughout the day. The former professor had become Harper's closest friend and most trusted advisor, their shared experience of homelessness creating an unshakable bond despite their different backgrounds. You've created something extraordinary here, Ruth observed as they surveyed the bustling center after the ceremonies concluded. 60 residents already, the health clinic booked solid, job training programs at capacity. We've created it, Harper corrected gently. I couldn't have done this without your insight. The center's design reflected their complementary perspectives. Harper's business efficiency merged with Ruth's academic understanding of systemic issues and their shared first-hand knowledge of homelessness. Every aspect, from the layout of sleeping quarters to the dignity-preserving check-in procedures, reflected thoughtful consideration of both practical needs and psychological impacts. As they walked through the residential wing, Harper stopped to speak with Clara, a former teacher who had become homeless after catastrophic medical bills following her husband's prolonged illness. Clara was one of the center's first residents and was now training to join the administrative staff. My apartment will be ready next month, Clara shared excitedly. First place of my own in almost 2 years. That's wonderful, Harper responded, genuinely delighted. Every success story reinforced the center's mission and validated her approach. Later that afternoon, Harper visited William's grave in the private cemetery on the Crawford estate grounds. The simple headstone, per his explicit instructions, bore only his name, dates, and a single line: he loved Eleanor. Harper placed fresh flowers beside the marker, taking a moment to update William on the foundation's progress, as she had done weekly since his passing. Mason's legal troubles continue, she reported, knowing William would appreciate this detail. The ethics investigation expanded after 3 more former clients came forward. His reputation is in tatters, but more importantly, he can't harm other vulnerable women now. The satisfaction in this outcome wasn't about revenge but accountability, a system functioning as it should to protect potential victims. Mason's public disgrace had been accompanied by regulatory reforms in legal practice that Harper had helped advocate for, creating lasting structural change. As autumn leaves danced around the cemetery, Harper reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The homeless woman who had once fought for survival on Chicago's streets now managed a 9-figure foundation, directed multiple initiatives, and had become a respected voice in discussions of homelessness policy. Yet she remained vigilantly aware of William's final advice that wealth was a tool, not an identity. She maintained connections to her experience of homelessness, regularly volunteering at shelters not affiliated with her foundation and mentoring individuals transitioning from street life. The danger of philanthropy, Ruth had observed during one of their planning sessions, is the distance it can create between giver and recipient. Your effectiveness comes from refusing that distance. This philosophy infused everything Harper did, from her hands-on management style to her insistence on hiring program graduates whenever possible. The Crawford Center wasn't just a service provider but a community where traditional hierarchies between helper and helped were intentionally blurred. Returning to the center for evening activities, Harper stopped by the counseling wing where Ruth was conducting a support group for women recently off the streets. Ruth's combination of professional expertise and personal experience made her uniquely effective in this role, her academic knowledge enhanced rather than replaced by her time in homelessness. Proper medication probably saved my life, Ruth was explaining to a woman struggling with bipolar disorder. But access to that medication required stability I couldn't achieve while homeless. The system demands prerequisites for help that require the very help being sought. This insight had shaped one of the center's most innovative programs, immediate medical and psychiatric services without administrative barriers, addressing health issues that often precipitated or perpetuated homelessness. As the anniversary day concluded, Harper hosted a small dinner in her apartment for key foundation staff, a deliberately modest celebration focused on future goals rather than past achievements. During dessert, her recently hired development director raised a toast. To William Crawford's legacy, he proposed, lifting his glass. And to Eleanor Bennett's influence, Harper added, thinking of the grandmother whose long-ago love story had set this improbable chain of events in motion. May we honor them both by continuing this work. Later, after her guests had departed, Harper returned to the park bench where Thomas Reed had found her exactly 1 year earlier. The contrast between then and now was almost incomprehensible, from desperate survival to purposeful impact, from isolation to community, from powerlessness to agency. Yet sitting on that same bench, now as a choice rather than a necessity, Harper recognized that the core of who she was remained unchanged. The values, resilience, and compassion that had guided her through homelessness now guided her philanthropy. The experiences that had seemed meaningless suffering had become the foundation of meaningful service. A young woman approached the bench, her appearance and wary expression instantly familiar to Harper, the physical manifestations of recent homelessness. "Excuse me," the woman began hesitantly. "Someone at the shelter said you might be able to help me find work. They said you understand what it's like." Harper smiled and moved over on the bench, making room. "I do understand," she replied. "And yes, I can help. Tell me your story. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your life's direction? A sudden reversal of fortune, good or bad, that transformed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey from homelessness to purpose resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more real-life stories of resilience and transformation. Don't forget to share with someone who might need a reminder that circumstances can change in an instant. Thank you for traveling this path with me, and remember, our greatest setbacks often prepare us for our most meaningful contributions.